right, so we are going to have a panel discussion right now. And progressing as a developer is the topic. So while the panel, the seats are all getting laid, I'll give you all the background about why we thought of this topic. This topic is actually relevant to everyone here, whether you are still in college, just out of college, you are maybe one or two maybe a couple of years in the industry, in your company, or maybe more than 5 to 8 to 15 years, right? The panel is a diverse panel with the background of people having been there, done that, sometimes not done that, and in different positions. So it should be an interesting panel. Let me start by calling the panel on the stage, right? We've all met Keith. Keith's from BuildKite. Gregorz. Gregorz, as you've just known, from Caligo. Hey, if we have to clap, make it loud, please. Hello. And we have Anshul. There he is. So now, since he's walking from there, we have to keep clapping till he gets on stage. All right. We have Piyush Verma, and we have Varsha Yadav. All right, hang on one sec. Could we make a little bit of a semicircle so we can actually see each other?
Can you sit with the back to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you want to sit down there? All right. All right, so we'll have a couple of mics. Three of you all use that mic. We'll use this mic. All right. So my name is Gautam Rege. I'll be moderating the panel here. I'm the co-founder of Josh Software. And I'd like to start this part of the panel by everyone giving a brief introduction of yourselves. All right, let's start with Keith.
Hi, I'm Keith. You may remember me from this morning. I am from Australia. I am a self-taught programmer. I've had no official qualifications. I dropped out of high school and I taught myself to program. And I do it now full time.
Okay, does it work? No, okay.
This one.
It is? Is it? Okay, yeah, it is. Cool, so I'm Greg. You might remember me from 5 minutes ago. I do have a degree in computer science that I did back in Poland. And I've been working with Ruby for, I know, like 9 years. Currently, I'm working as a head of engineering at the Caligo Solutions in Singapore.
Hey guys, I'm Anshul. I'm from Bombay. Currently, I'm running a services company called DifferenceEngine.ai. We are into machine learning and deep learning and that kind of stuff now. I've been doing Ruby for about a decade now. I've done like a couple of product startups. This would be my third services startup. I've worked across a lot of stacks and a lot of languages.
I got a mic. Yeah, hi, I'm Piyush. I've been writing Ruby for a while. Actually, many languages. Ruby is just one of them. I primarily work in infrastructure and data domain. I work as director of reliability of data and infrastructure at trustingsocial.com. There's a party at the end of the conference to attend.
Hello everyone, I'm Varsha and I work at Josh Software and I work in Ruby language and I recently started working in Golang as well and I find it very interesting like Ruby and I have an experience of 2 years and 2.5 years. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not introducing myself because I'm not supposed to. But guys, it is interesting to find out that all of us have taken a different career path. Right? You've mentioned, Keith, that you've college dropout or school dropout. What was it? Sorry.
Yeah, it was school.
All right, that's
not
brilliant.
Not the college one, the one before.
Okay.
Yeah. You can tell I've not been to school.
Oh yeah. And we've had Gregorz, who's done his computer engineering. Everyone else has different degrees of education. But as a career path, all of us are at different positions in our life right now. Right? What made you choose the decisions that you have actually taken, and were there any mistakes in your career that you've done? So let's start from top down to see what are the paths, career paths. I'm keeping it open for all. If not, I will force volunteer.
Programming was not my first job. My first job was delivering pizzas. And that was a lot of fun because I got to drive around and just listen to music. I've made lots of decisions in getting to where I am today. Lots of them, millions, trillions of decisions.
Some of the things which worked, some of the things which didn't work, which you liked, which you didn't like.
Yeah, I always kind of followed what I thought would be fun. When I got bored at a job. Sorry, I should prefix for this with my experiences are from living and working in Australia, and I'm not quite sure what the differences are in the work cultures between here and Australia. So take anything I say, you can, with the context that it's Australian. I would follow the fun projects. I would follow the technologies that I was interested in. If I was interested in something, I would learn it and then try and get a job in it so I could do it full time. I enjoy programming. It's a pastime, something that I enjoy doing. So I would just try to make my days fun.
Yeah. So I ended up in programming pretty much by chance. When I was 11, mom got a 386 at home, and then that's how I got into programming. I have a degree in pure maths. Over the years, I've made like tons and tons of mistakes. Mostly, I guess I'm here basically by chance.
I'm here by choice. Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah. Well, I would say
I like the way he says it really seriously. We're looking at you on here by choice.
Gotta look serious, right? Yeah. I'm on camera.
Oh yeah, you can see yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so I think after I've been coding for almost 12, 15 years now, I would say that today I'm a regurgitation of the mistakes that I've done in the past. And all along the way, mistakes that have been costly for bringing down an entire organization as well at times. The only thing I would say is that, I meet a lot of, I've had I would say fortunate enough to work with a lot of young and talented engineers in my career. And one thing I would just recommend is just keep making choices and decisions. Like, don't wait for someone else to make it for you. Like, if you like something, you see something, just go and build it. Like, just keep coding. Don't get distracted or get choices imposed on you. Make your own decisions, break your own code. Like, it's all right. Like, it's just software at the end of it.
That's an interesting answer that you've given. And it also gets me to move the direction of this entire panel in a slightly different case. How many people here are fresh out of college in your first year of work? A show of hands? All right, so this question would be relevant for y'all. Right? In a way, what is an advice that you can give to somebody who's just beginning their career with a caveat in a Ruby company? Is that a doubt that all people out of college typically have right now? What is expected of me? Yeah?
Actually, I have a question to ask for the audience here. How many of you are attending Deccan RubyCon for the first time? Yeah, see, wow. I want to actually cite something here which is cool about Deccan RubyCon. One of the other, I was just having a word with someone outside and I said that, this is the same venue where GopherCon was happened as well. You see same old faces. One thing about Deccan RubyCon is that I see a lot of young faces every time. Like, every time I attend this conference, there are new faces which I haven't seen before. So, yeah, well done. Thank you for coming down.
Now for the advice part.
Okay. So it's been just 2.5 years I am out of college, and I would like to give an advice which I also followed by the experience that whenever you get inside the company or industry, you just don't be scared of asking questions or being judged for asking a silly question, because it's all right, it's okay. They were also at that moment they were also at that point in some part of their career. So it's okay, and just keep learning, because without learning, it's very difficult to survive in this industry. As per as my experience. Thank you.
To follow up on that, if you find yourself in a company where you are being punished for asking questions, for making mistakes, it's not you, it's the company. Change the environment. There are lots of places. There are lots of places around. There's lots of companies that will hire you, that will give you internship or the job even if you don't have experience. And they will let you make mistakes because this is the way that you are learning. So if you find yourself in a place where you don't feel comfortable making mistakes, as a developer fresh out of college, just make sure that you find a place where you are not stressed, where you don't feel the pressure that everything has to be done correctly in the first try.
Nice. All right, I completely like the way Grzegorz said you change the environment. Another person would probably say, just change the job. Well, we're all into retention game. So let's move on a little bit. So you've been programming for maybe a couple of years. Even CRUD operations or the small modules that you work on look very enticing. After 2 years, that starts getting boring. Now is the time, I can see a few heads nod. Interesting. All right, so when that boredom creeps in, right, how do you handle it? An approach could be that you look up for more complex work. The other approach could be you learn something new. Which approach would you recommend, advise, or a third option?
My first 1, 2, 3 jobs in programming were at consultancies. There weren't product companies, and so there was always a different project to work on. There'd be a new customer with new requirements. It meant that I got to try new things, learn new things. That was a lot of fun. Some customers brought us existing projects, and we had to sometimes fix them or work on them. And that was a good experience because it meant that I got to see a wide range of code bases. I've forgotten the question, but...
what do you do when the boredom creeps in after 2 years of doing the same work? So you want to do something new?
Yeah, I just quit. No, because it's like, I don't want to resent what I do. Like, I love programming. I don't want to hate it. You don't want it to feel like it's a bore, because it's a lot of fun. And if I'm hating my job, and then I'm going to hate programming, and I don't want to have that. So and as a Rails developer, especially in Australia at the moment, there is a high demand for people that do what we do, especially Ruby, especially Rails. And luckily enough for me, in my circumstance, is that there was a lot of jobs on offer in Australia. And so it was actually more about me getting to choose what I wanted to do instead of kind of needing to find something just for the sake of finding something.
Interesting. Any other thoughts?
Go ahead.
No, I was giving you the mic.
So, yeah, another thing, completely agree with that. And another thing that's really worked well for me over the years is that always have a side project, like something you do at work. And then there's a lot of new technologies. There's a lot of new stuff going on out there. Explore it. Like, always have some side project that you're working on that you just play with, right? Playing is a great way to learn stuff.
So awesome. This also brings me to one of the questions that was asked from the audience. Having said that, if any one of you all have a question, just keep your hand raised. I'll open it out to the audience. There were also some people who tweeted out some questions to us. One of the questions is on similar lines. From similar questions asked by Swapnil and Abhinandan about, along with Ruby, should you learn other languages and frameworks? I heard that opinion of yours. But the interesting question would be why? And if so, which ones would you recommend people learn? Other languages or other frameworks?
I can say some words. I think it's important to learn some front-end skills, but currently the front-end world is a little bit scary because there's a million frameworks to choose from. I would just choose one and then learn that one. So learn some front-end skills. But I would recommend actually learning SQL and learning databases and learning them really well. So much to the point where you understand indexes. You can explain an SQL query and understand the query planner. You can look at these things and truly understand how to optimize the database for performance. Most because in my experience, the teams that I've worked on, there's always been a lack of experience in database administration and SQL. And those people on the team that knew SQL were the most popular people in the team. Because it'd be, oh, hey, can you come help me with this SQL thing? Or how should I make this index faster? Because sometimes making an index in a database just doesn't solve your performance problem. In some cases, it can actually make performance worse. So what I would say is truly understand databases. Postgres is the one that I think is the best. Truly understand Postgres, truly understand how to manage one of those databases and like the nitty-gritties of that system.
Just a quick question. How many of you are actually scared of programming? Like when you read code, you actually get scared. You're like, oh wow, this is actually too complex a code for me to understand. Yeah.
No, that's also a strict question to hire people.
No, so like I had this. To answer your previous question, how do you get past boredom? I think we should have Satish answer that. Like 30 years, man. Yeah. Like, collective experience.
40, yeah.
40,
It's
yeah.
reached
So there you
40
go.
years.
Yeah.
So,
is Satish around?
anyway,
okay.
Satish he was, I think he started his first company in 78 or something.
Yeah.
So I'm sure most of us here were a sparkle in our parents' eyes at that time also. But, interestingly, Satish, now that you mentioned it, Satish kept moving from one language to the other too at that time. So when Java was very new, he was working in Java. Then he moved to Ruby. Now he's moving to Go. I don't know what he's going to do next. But languages, if you had to pick something new to learn, what would you pick?
I would say just pick any language, because one of the barriers that I had when I was coding, like I used to write, I still write a lot of code, and I'd become sort of unidimensional. I had written a lot of C++ code, then I wrote a lot of Python code, and what I realized that I was actually started thinking Python rather than logic. I had to make a conscious choice of actively coding in more than a couple of languages in a given single day as well. What that forced was I would stop thinking semantics of a language. I started thinking semantics of programming. Like, why should something be structured in a manner? Why should something be written in a way which is understandable, readable, regardless of the language as well? And coming to speak of it, I also stopped doing meta programming in Python, because I realized that if I write code in a certain way which is unreadable for me, it will be unreadable for others as well. And at that point, I stopped coding in Perl as well. Well, yeah, for the readability of it.
Can I add something?
Of course.
I would say that if you want to learn a new language, pick something that is very different from what you're using on a daily basis. Because if you are using, I don't know, if you're using CoffeeScript and you're learning JavaScript or the other way around, it extends your knowledge, but it's just like, it's like one step away from where you are. If, for example, you are a Ruby programmer on a daily basis and you pick Haskell, it's like 1 kilometer away. It's very different paradigm because it's functional programming. It gives you static typing. You are learning something that you might not use at work, you might not write any project later in Haskell, but knowing how to program in Haskell will change the way that you write your Ruby code. From my experience, 2 or 3 years ago, I picked up Elixir, we started using it at work, and now my Ruby code is written in a more functional way, just because I started writing Elixir, which is functional, and I enjoyed it, and I thought that, hey, there is a lot of ways that I am forced to use here that I could use even if the language doesn't make me. I could just write the code in a more functional way because it's easier to understand. So learning another language will affect the way that you are writing code in any language.
I think that's a pretty neat and very sound advice. There are a lot of people here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people here, we do feel that if I'm going to say learn Haskell and it has nothing to do with my current work or job profile, what should I do if I learn it? Do you face this question earlier? Do you face this question? What is the reason? Would you pick up Haskell as part of your extra learning if it didn't have anything related to your work? And that's exactly what Gregor is saying. Yes, you should. Anshul?
Yeah, so that's so true. Working in another language definitely makes your other language code better. One thing I'd like to add to what he said was that you should know at least one interpreted, one compiled, and one functional language. Because there's just something about these three different paradigms that teaches you a lot more about how the machine works, how logic works, how things work internally. Like when you're dealing with memory directly, that will teach you something. And when you're doing functional, it opens new ways of solving problems, right? So your code in every sector will become better if you at least know at least one interpreted, one compiled, and one functional language.
I have some slightly opposite advice, if that's okay. So I have learned only a few languages in my career. Started with ASP and PHP. Then I learned Ruby, and now most recently Golang. I've never learned a language for the fun of it. I've never done that before. Mostly because, so here's something, right? You shouldn't think that you need to learn a language before you can start something. Like, oh, I can't start my career because I don't know Haskell yet. Like, I need, like the advice you just said then, oh, I don't know 2 of the 3 language types, so I can't start. So I have to learn first. And then learning is hard, and then you lose momentum, and you're like, oh, I can't learn it. Functional programming is hard. I'm a crap programmer. I give up. Like, no, just you can. In my experience, I've kept with the one language, and I think if you're going to learn something, learn to solve problems. Like, let the problems drive what you learn. Part of BuildKite was written in Ruby that shouldn't have been written in Ruby, and I learned Go specifically to solve the problem. Not because I thought Go would be an intellectually fun thing to learn. I don't want to learn a new language. I don't want to. I can't be bothered. I'd rather be watching TV or something that's way more fun. So I keep what I learned to a minimum, so I can learn how to solve problems better and identify the technologies to go after for the problem. So that's what I would say. I would say, like, just start making things and learning how to solve problems, because you learn way more by solving problems than you do, I think. You learn way more practical skills by making something and solving your own problems versus understanding recursion in Haskell.
And wow, now that's interesting. We've got 2 completely different opinions here. But interestingly, we have 5 people.
Yeah, note that we're probably both wrong. Like, I'm wrong, you're wrong, everyone's wrong. This is my experience. Like, I've got an opinion, but it's your path. You've got to choose your own path. Yeah.
No, I think that I don't think that these are different opinions. You say that when you start, you shouldn't learn things before you start, and I completely agree with that. I got my first programming job by sending an email to one company saying, hey, I don't know how to program, but I will learn it. Will you give me an internship? And they did. So, yes, and later, when you want to develop your skills, when you want to become a better software engineer, that's when I think that you should start learning different things from what you already know. Yeah.
Right. So the key word here is keep learning, whether it is on the job, whether it is away from the job, as long as you're learning something new, which also, I just got a tweet from somebody which says, hey, if boredom creeps in, it's probably too much of repetitive work. Automate it or fix it. That makes a lot of sense too. All right, so this is getting interesting. Maybe you learn a language, either way, to learn something new in some other paradigm. You learn it because it may solve a problem in your current work. The question is, how do I start going about it? Learning a language, if I start, I'm pretty sure, at least I can speak for myself, that if I start reading the manual, it's probably a cure for insomnia. But how do you go about it? What's your thoughts?
I think programming is just in trial and error. Like, you just have to try and try. If you have an interest or you got to know about any new language, then just start. You don't need to read everything at once. You can just start. Whatever you have read, you just start implementing it. You make mistake and you just correct yourself, and in this way, you go on learning. So that's all programming. You have to make mistakes, then only you learn. Yeah.
So when I learned Go recently, it was the first language I'd learned in forever. And when I learned it, I just treated it like it was Ruby. I pretended like it wasn't a different language, and so I just wrote as if it was Ruby, and obviously that won't work. But when I got to like a while loop or something, I would then Google how to do a while loop in Go. And then I didn't learn Go. Like I still don't really know any of the Go-isms. I don't know true Go. I know my version of Go, which is pretty much Ruby, but with more curly braces. But I can go from there. Like once I'm comfortable working with the language and the toolset and the ecosystem, then I can start branching off into, well, what is the correct way to do this in Go? What is the correct way to do it? You know, this in what other language? I just treat it like I already know it, and then just Google the bits that I don't know.
So what you're saying is the difference between the practical programmer and the perfectionist. It goes both ways.
Yeah, totally. I am no way a perfectionist. I learned Go to solve a specific problem, and once I'd solved it, I was like, bye. I'm done with Go. I solved my problem.
All right. So the interesting, either get it done, or ensure you keep getting it right. But you have to keep going. No pun intended there. But
no, that was a good pun. That was you should have intended that pun because it was good.
Yeah.
So there was also another. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So one more thing that happens once you start sort of flipping around languages is that it becomes easier. Once you are through learning 2-3 languages, the fourth is going to be a lot easier. And another thing that's very true in 2018 wasn't true like back in the day is that the getting started pages of most languages are really, really good now. Like maybe Haskell's not in that category that much yet, but most language designers put a lot of thought into their documentation now. So getting started pages of various languages are really good, and that's always a good starting point. At least for me, it's worked well.
Also, to follow up, there is like more resources to learn new languages than ever. You can go to udemy.com or some other website like Coursera. They've got free courses, they've got paid courses that are always 90% off. And you can just, you can just watch a few hours of videos and just copy the code, and then you know enough to write simple programs. So I think that starting with new language is easier now than ever before.
Yeah, or you look at a conference video, like, how to learn the basics of Hanami. And all right, so here's another interesting question which had come out from the audience. And before I ask them, I'm keeping the floor open for questions. So anyone still out there? All right, let's have a question. Do we have a runner mic? Yeah.
Hi. My question is that what is the future of machine learning in Ruby?
What is the future of machine learning in Ruby?
Was there a history?
There is a company here. Oh, you're from behavioral sciences marrying technology.
Yes.
So,
Sorry.
So while the scene in Ruby is not that good, is not first class, I would say right now, but it's getting really, really good. The people at SciRuby are doing an awesome job, and there's a huge amount of machine learning that you can practically do in Ruby right now. The thing is, there are not many learning resources to start learning machine learning in Ruby. Like, you're going to have to learn Python for the most part if you're going to learn any effective deep learning or machine learning today. But translating all that back to Ruby is quite doable now. The people at SciRuby, they deserve sort of applause, like they've done a marvelous job.
SciRuby has even one of the gems which is interestingly called Daru, right? And that's Samir Deshmukh. I think he should have been here at the conference, but he's probably traveling the world somewhere. So there are a lot of contributions actually happening towards the ecosystem for machine learning, but of course that's in data science, but the ecosystem is getting built. I do believe that machine learning should not be related to a particular language per se. It's the concept that you want to pick up and then pick up the right tool for the job.
Yes, like in Python and R, there are lots of library. So if I want to start any code in machine learning, so it's difficult to create in Ruby because like I want to create a program related to data science. Then I have to write lots of code for that. But in Python, there are lots of library available. So question is that how we can increase like how we can make it easy in Ruby, like I want to implement data science or AI or machine learning, anything.
Do you want to do this for fun or do you want to do this for your career?
Actually, I have an interest in machine learning. That's why.
Yeah.
Because for particular concept, I don't want to switch a language. I'm Ruby programmer. I love Ruby.
I'll
But
give you two answers. You can pick one that you like. So the first one is, if you're doing this for fun, well, you could go ahead and build it. Well, if it doesn't exist, go build it. You know, like a lot of times, this is actually a standard question that a lot of people used to ask, like, and like, why do you want to do this again? It's already been done. Well, the answer is because I can, so I did. So, no, I mean, that's when you're doing it for the fun of it, right? Now, if you're solving a mission critical problem and you're trying to squeeze in Ruby into that, probably my advice would be don't. Solve the problem first and then switch on to see whether, I mean, it could very well be true that if you haven't programmed in R till date or Scala till date, right, and you want to do machine learning, there are two outcomes of this. One, you start doing machine learning in Scala and you realize that, hey, do I really like Ruby anymore? Or is Scala such a fantastic language to go on to? I'm not advocating one over the other. I'm saying that could happen as well. And suddenly you realize that, oh, actually I was trying to squeeze in a wrong tool. Two, you have a lot of time at your hand. You don't like watching TV like he does. And so you say that, okay, might as well just create stuff in this. So does that answer your question or leave you with more questions?
For a change, Piyush has actually answered questions instead of asking them.
I think you can also try using JRuby, because then you have access to all the Java libraries, and Java has library for everything, so there should be some machine learning Java. So you can just, if you want to strictly stick to Ruby, then that's probably the easiest way to give it a start.
thank you.
Yeah. Also, interestingly, you may have just answered the question that we were discussing earlier about learning something new. So instead of trying to say, you know, hey, I want to do this in Ruby, but it's not there, two options. You have the time, you build it in Ruby. The other way, you get to learn something new. So as long as you're learning something new, you should be good.
I think it's easy to learn a programming language compared to create an algorithm for machine learning. So I think I can learn a Python 1 month or 2 months, but creating that algorithm for machine learning for Ruby, that will take more time.
Is the CFP open for next year?
Well, there are plenty of CFPs open. You might want to submit something anyway. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so let's...
Wait, there's one.
All right, there is one more question there, right behind you.
Hello. So it's not a question type of a question, but just as you said, learning is a part and we should learn. So currently I start learning looking at the blogs and looking at the internet materials and everything. But a few of my seniors suggested me you should try reading the books that you want to try. So once I started reading the books, I found out reading the books makes more depth understanding about the things that you want to learn. So just wanted to add what thoughts you have reading, at what level I should go, or not level I should say, at what resources I should move for. But I would find books a lot helpful.
Can I answer? So usually I've categorized learning into 3 aspects. You know, like one is that you learn by watching videos. That, you know, you go online, watch videos. I tend to go to sleep while I do that. So it's a good sleeping pill for me. You know, read books, that's another way of learning new code, learning new jobs while you're at the job. There's another third way which actually people tend to forget about is actually reading the code itself. You know, get used to reading code. Like, usually if I was to suggest that you have to split your time, take out at least, you know, if not more, 2 to 3 hours every week and just read code. You know, like just go to any project that you like and start reading how other people have done. What reading code does is, one, it tells you how to structure your code better because you're actually looking at code which is out there in the open source domain. A lot of people have been using it. It tells you how it has been maintainable. It starts giving you ideas of how to extend code. Second, it also teaches you niche skills of the language that you don't probably know of. Like, I was coding in Golang for 2 years and I did not know the direction of the channel. Like, it's after I started reading code, like, oh, what is this direction sign? So a lot of those things start happening as well. 3, it gets you into habit of not just relying on Stack Overflow when you run into problems. You know, like you can actually just go read the library code and understand why is it breaking.
Yeah, I would also add that when I'm learning certain language or framework, especially something that is like, you know, in early stage of development, I try not to get books because they quickly get outdated. And there's nothing more frustrating than buying a book and seeing that this book is for version 1.0 and that since then there were like 50 breaking changes and your code from the book just doesn't work anymore. So if I'm learning some particular language, some library, something like this, I more rely on the blog post because then I know that there will be like, you know, if the blog post is from last month, then probably it will use the new version. However, when I'm learning skills that are like more fundamental, like for example, software architecture, it doesn't change every month or every year. There are certain concepts that are from 60s, 70s, and that they are still relevant. So then I more rely on the books because on the blog post, everyone can write whatever they want. And the books, you know that people put, usually, it's not 100%, but usually the books are written by more experienced people and they are like, you know, people spend more time thinking about what exactly to put in the book because once it's released, they cannot just modify it.
So to add to that a little bit, you know, I remember the days when I was trying to learn C and I started reading C by Cunningham and Ritchie. And I was like, damn, this language is tough. I finally started programming in C. I got proficient with it by all the techniques. Of course, I don't think there were any videos at that time, but you figure it out, you start programming. After I had actually got certain level of proficiency in C, I started reading KNR again. I freaking loved it. Because there are sometimes a book could be a reference book, sometimes a book could be one which is going a very baby step-wise. You need to know your proficiency level before choosing the right book. Otherwise, as you said, this is the third reference to Insomnia coming in. You'll get bored. But figure out the right way to do it. I think you should be able to do that. I thought I saw a hand. Yes.
Is that a sponsored question?
It's called seeding.
Yeah, so a lot of people, or especially youngsters, I've seen do this thing called planning their career. Right? One thing I would like to ask. One thing I would like to ask people on the panel is, how far ahead have you looked in your life when you are like planning?
All right. Before you answer that question, it shows me 4 minutes here. All right, because planning your career, man. All right, please. Who wants to take that up?
Okay. So yeah, mostly basically just have fun, right? That's how I have gone about things. I don't really think I've planned my career in any particular way. Yeah, at least that's my answer. Basically, you know you're going in the right direction when you're having fun. And when you're not having fun, that's the time to sort of sit back, think about what's going wrong, what you need to do differently, and sort of where to go next.
Yeah, I would go. So planning actually, as per as my experience, it doesn't really work so 100% because sometimes in front of yours, some opportunities comes and your planning might change. Like if you are planning to grow in one language or in one technology, but you get some other challenge wherein you find it interesting and your plan might change. So in my case, I don't really plan beyond 6 months or a year.
And I'm just keeping my job, man.
That's called the most practical answer. Just keep your job.
I think
Plan to
that
keep your job.
at some point you will figure out whether you, I don't know, whether you would like to have your own company because then that gives you more independence, or whether you don't want to worry about the stuff that's not programming related, which means that you will remain an employee and working for other people. So this is not something that you will be planning that, okay, in like 3-4 years, I want to be there exactly, but you will just know which direction you're going. I think that exactly as long as you're enjoying your work, as long as you're having fun and you think that you are moving into the direction that will make you enjoy more, then that's great.
Yeah, I completely agree on this one. That in your career, at any given point in time, even when you're starting up, the first few years, you probably want to concentrate on only one word: learning. Once you have figured out what you like to do, you can probably change the direction of your career, the planning part, into saying, hey, I want to go deeper into technology and go in depth into it, or I want to solve problems from the business domain. Depending on that, keep making maybe a 3-year plan at most. Do you recommend making a plan lesser or more? I understand that it keeps changing, but thoughts?
Just want to add something there, which is, if you're really serious about your career, I mean, jokes apart, is that keep few hours every day to learn more than what you do. I mean, maybe you're the best job as well, that doesn't matter. Like, give yourself, like I usually say that 20 till 30 is the peak of your time to actually start learning stuff. And while you are at it, just keep learning as much as you can, but at the same time also understand that any problem that you solve has to be solved in the depth of it. Like do you want to learn a new language? Like today there's Go, tomorrow there is Rust, whatever. But understand why this language even exists, or what problem is there to be solved. Why was this even invented? Go, and the further you can date your knowledge to keep going back. Like if you know something from 2005, go back to it. What was it like in 1995? Go further back. What was it in 1985? Go back. What was it in 1975? And the further you go back, you'll actually realize how all that has changed, it still remains the same. Like most of the concepts that you're trying to learn have always been around. That's a precursor to your talk. Yeah, okay, we can go 5 minutes extra. I've saved 5 minutes from him now. So, yeah, anyway, no, so just keep going deep into it, and you will have to spend extra hours at it. Like, there's no shortcut there. So, like, this especially, I mean, this is not bound to any age group or something. Like, just because you're fresh out of college, or I've been doing something for 10 years, or he's been doing it for 15 years, doesn't matter. Like, look, if you have to go an extra mile, you will have to spend an extra effort towards it. And just pick up anything and just keep doing it. And go to the depths of it. Learn the concepts behind it. Why does it exist? And just away from, try spreading yourself thin on width of knowledge. So one advice that I give people is, get comfortable not knowing stuff as well. Because what you're working on right now is more important, and you have to understand it inside out.
So
I was going to add one more thing, if that's okay.
Sure.
When I started BuildKite, I was, like I said earlier, I was by myself, and I gave myself the title of CEO, because that's a cool title. I'm a CEO of myself. And then when my co-founder joined, I was a CEO of 2 people. Yeah! And that was fun.
Looks good on the business card.
Oh, it was great on the business cards, because people would say founder and CEO, and I said, ooh, it's very fancy. And I was that role for 5 years, well, up until last year. Last year, I had like this real struggle, and I was upset for a really long time, and I was really sad because I was doing something that I didn't enjoy anymore. I'd I was this CEO person, and CEO has to do CEO things, as per the job title. And I didn't want to do those things. I didn't want to do spreadsheets, or like, I think I'm a pretty crappy manager, because, I don't know why, but there was lots of things in my role that I didn't enjoy doing. And then I took some time and I checked in with myself, and I said, like, what do I enjoy? Like, what is it? Let's go back to the core. Why am I doing this? Why did I get into this in the first place? And it was about shipping products to people. I think all of our bills are paid for by products or services, probably. I mean, this is an industry that has money, and we've all got, some of us have got jobs and stuff that pay bills. And what I was going to say is the thing that I find most in my career is being as close to the customer as possible. I've spent a lot of time working in back-end stuff. And so you may spend weeks and weeks on a change to change some numbers in a graph. Like, oh, I made this response like 50 milliseconds quicker, but no one's really going to notice. And that's very demoralizing. It sucks when you're at the back end and you don't get to interact with people. If you want to have a lot of fun in programming, at least from my perspective, I tried to get myself as close to the customer as possible. Because then you could build products and you could say, hey, I shipped this product, and they would say, oh, Keith, this is so cool. Thank you so much. This makes my life so much better. And that feedback from customers really reminded me of why I'm in this industry to begin with, because I get to make these things, people use them, they're happy, and I'm happy. It's a little, not related, but a little
interesting.
tidbit.
But yeah, try to be as close to the business or close to your customer as possible. I like that.
Yeah, and the good thing about doing that is that I've never really planned my career, but you become a better buyer for a business. Because when you work for a company, you're selling your services and they pay you money. And the more that you can make yourself worth more, then there's a higher chance you are of getting a job. And this company has got a product. So if you know product design and you can deal with customers and you know about product features and how to build things in a quick way that gets product feedback, I think you're going to have the most success.
Interesting. So I'm going to go back to something that Piyush mentioned earlier about a couple of hours every day for yourself to learn something new. And I'm going to put a twist to it. All of us, I mean, we've thrived because of open source. So what do you rate as the importance of open source contribution every day or every week? And how would you advise or recommend to our audience how they should go about this if you believe it is important enough for their careers?
I started my career as an open source developer, as a KDE developer, and I got paid for it. So, well, it was cool. So, anyway, the advantage of open source here is that most of the stuff that you learn and you know today, you would not know if it was closed source. So it's like paying it forward. You know, like, so whatever you do, you keep it out in the open source domain. Not always, like there's not a blanket rule that, but what it does is, if you're building something for yourself, and like if I was to build some infrastructure tool, and I would build it closed source, maybe it works for me. But if I make it open source right now, and a lot of other people are going to use it, it gives me active feedback on what am I missing out here. What is it that it's probably an extension to what he just mentioned, that you bring it closer to the customer. Like, and as just code, which is not being written for an active business problem, open source is the fastest way to bring it closest to your consumers. Consumers doesn't have to be someone who pays for it, just someone who uses it. And putting it out there has multiple advantages. One, when other people use it, you see the assumptions that you had made, which are probably incorrect. Something that you had really hard-coded, which is unusable for other people. Third, you haven't tested it enough. You get to know that as well. Fourth, well, people leave some really bad comments at times on your code, and it tells you that, oh, you got to improve there. So it's probably a consortium of all those factors, and one of the most important ways to improve yourself, get recognition for your work, and just get an active feedback cycle which is faster than you building stuff in silo and watching it work.
Nice. Okay, if I may. What I want to say is that just the fact that you are writing some open source doesn't mean immediately that you are a better programmer. there is sometimes in some place there is this concept that you shouldn't send your resume, that you should send your GitHub profile, and that you will be judged based on your open source contributions. And that puts a pressure on people that I should be working in my free time and contributing to open source project because otherwise I will not get a good job. That's not true. You should not feel the pressure to do open source just because you think that without it you are not worth as much as a programmer. I interviewed, I know, like hundreds of people, and some of the best programmers I worked with had almost zero open source contributions because in their spare time they were doing scuba diving or photography. And I interviewed some people who had a lot of open source contributions, but I didn't hire them because just from the conversation, I thought that I wouldn't enjoy working with those people. So I would say that if you like writing code in your spare time, that's great. Go ahead, and it's awesome. And I really support you because that's great that you will be contributing to the open source community. But if you don't like doing it, if you just want to write code 9 to 5, you might be a great programmer as well. So I would say that open source is great, but you shouldn't feel that it's obligatory for you.
Well, actually, that is pretty sound advice. Because honestly, and I have always been telling people that you should try and get a good GitHub profile. It helps you learn, it helps you interact with the community, it also helps you, showcase yourself. It helps you learn from other people, and you automatically become a little more confident. But I do take your point that if it's not something that you're really interested in, don't. But if it is something that you're interested in, you are interested in being a good programmer, I think you should take open source contributions pretty seriously.
I know. Imagine that you are a doctor and you try to get a job at the hospital. Do you think that they will ask you, have you performed some surgeries in your spare time? Right? The fact that you do not do something that is related to your profession after hours doesn't mean that you cannot be very good in your profession, right?
I hear you, but I'm sure the doctor is reading on the bus. But I like that analogy. I shall keep that in mind. I'll open up for questions from the audience again. We have a couple of minutes. Yes, sir. Do we have a mic, please? Please raise your hand so that I can see it if you want to ask a question.
Talk about languages. So I would like to learn about the products. So most of the time product fails because of the design, and I would like to hear from you.
Could you say that again with the mic closer to your mouth?
Okay. So basically product fails because of the design. So if you are a fresher and if you know a few languages, you will get a job. And if you know Ruby, then I'm sure that you will get job at some place. But as an experienced developer, if you don't know the design patterns, then it's very hard to survive you in that industry. So I hope you have got the question.
So let me paraphrase that. So it's like agreed that as a junior developer or a fresher out of college, there are a lot of languages that can help you get a job. If you're a Ruby programmer, you could definitely get a job somewhere. However, as a senior programmer, the concepts of product design, the concept of knowing more about the software architecture, scalability, performance is more important than learning the language.
Yes.
And your question is, what are your thoughts on that, and what is your advice to people?
Yep.
Okay. I've seen fairly good senior programmers. See, basically different programmers excel at different things, and that's all right, right? So I see this notion often like you should go and read a design pattern book or something. I don't agree with it. Maybe this is a bit controversial, but I think your engineering intelligence needs to grow. That's what basically makes you a senior programmer, right? And engineering is all about finding an optimal solution at a acceptable cost, right? And that, so if certain techniques are helping you do that, definitely go investigate them, learn about them. There are certain architecture patterns that help with that. But if your problem domain, so just like generically going and learning a lot of techniques that have nothing to do with your problem domain rarely helps, I think. So at least in my opinion, when you have a problem, then going and looking for techniques that help with that more is a more better way of sort of walking down the path.
So I would like to add upon that, like, don't pull yourself back that you don't know things, because you might not have got the opportunity to work on those problems and those kind of things. So it's okay. It's always okay to talk with the people that you don't know these things. Then you should always strive for the to whom I should ask that where I should get this knowledge and all. So once you start, no, it's never late, and you should always get that knowledge. So it's okay to not know and you just start.
We are running out of time, so any last thoughts?
Yeah, a long last thought, then a mic drop.
Short thoughts.
Mic drop after that. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah. So, I think there's a bit of recurring theme here is that why do we do this? Do we do this to get a better job, or do we do this to become better at who we are? Now, there's a slight distinction here. If you're doing this just because you want a better job, there are different ways to get it done. Like you could follow X number of cookbooks, recipes, follow his advice, he'll give you a good job, GitHub profile, etc. So you can negotiate later. But if you really want to get better at what you do, and I think that's what the crux of the question was, that how do I get better at who I am right now? Not as a person, but as a programmer. So to improve on that, I don't think there are any quantifiable measures of, do 4 hours of open source coding, read 4 books, read 3 books. If you're liking doing what you do, you will continue to do it. I think the bigger question here is, how do I generate interest in what I do? And to get to that, the shortest answer is just keep writing code which is being used by other people. Try to do that. Try to work on certain small projects. The biggest sense and kick of accomplishment that moves us forward is by getting stuff done. Like even if there's an SQL alchemy layer out there, like I remember someone in 2009 asked me when I presented a talk at a conference, and I said, I built an ORM. And they asked that, why an ORM again? Well, because it taught me so many things which I would not have learned otherwise. And once I got that done, it gives you a sense of satisfaction and you start enjoying doing things. Having done something once gives you the kick of having to do it again in a better way. So just primarily focus on that and see if that gives you the kick to continue doing what you do. And if you cannot, find a mentor. Look for a mentor in your community, in your company, or at a conference that you find, could be anywhere, and see if they help you get better at it or can inspire you in a way. No, not that you need to get inspired. I mean, just in case you're looking for an inspiration.
Nice. All right, I think we are actually running out of time, but if you're going to keep your questions short, that'll help. I have the short answer too.
So why most of the big companies are not investing in Rails currently? Because it's languages, we have Rails from 14 years and it's much matured language. As we compare to Java as well, it's now much more matured.
I'll also paraphrase that question to an interesting question that had come up on Twitter by Parth. Are you here? Is Parth here? All right. The question is pretty interesting. He says, we all like Ruby, but Ruby is not adopted by banks. Right? Why?
So I feel like I can answer this. I used to work for a credit card processing company, which is almost like a bank, and we used Rails and we used Ruby. That was fine. The idea that banks don't use Ruby is not quite true. In Australia, at least, a lot of our customers are banks, and they use Ruby as well in Australia. I think the biggest thing you'll find is that banks, they firstly don't like spending money, and they've already got systems written in 1962 that work, and they work well. and they employ like 3 old people that know COBOL, whatever it's called, and they don't have to change anything. All they got to do is just like keep upping their fees, and they make more money. The bank has no reason to rewrite it in Ruby. Why would they spend the money? They're making those dollars. So I think that's why you probably won't see banks in Ruby and banks, is because there's no reason for them to use it. What they have works.
So though your question was adopting in the enterprise, I'm assuming it's a almost similar question to like once banks adopt, people start adopting. I don't think that is really necessarily true. Interestingly, I met one of the gentlemen here from BNY Mellon, and they're evaluating Ruby. So I'm sure it's getting into fintech. Oh, there you are. I'm sure fintech is getting into Ruby. Any other thoughts? Of course, you're the man.
Yeah, I'm working with a couple of fintech startups who are doing Ruby. So even in India, this is very much true. Banks as a special case, because like they have working software, why should they rewrite it? So that's the only reason I think there.
Or should we sum that up as it's a matter of time that Ruby is anyway going to get? Ruby is always in the mainstream languages right now. If you Google Ruby, you probably find the language first before the jewel.
Yeah.
So it is actually getting to be a case where people understand that it's just a language which will become as popular as Java or .NET when you talk about programming languages. All right.
To convince big companies to switch to some language, there needs to be a significant benefit. And now the question is, what do they gain by moving from Java or some other language to Ruby? Like we use Ruby because it's a language that programmers enjoy, but from the company perspective, what is the benefit? So I think that in a matter of time, the companies will abandon the current code, and maybe they will abandon Java, but not necessarily move to Ruby. Maybe they will move to JavaScript because it's so popular, and because there is like almost everything that is written will be eventually written in JavaScript. So I think that it is a matter of time before the migration, but the migration may not be to Ruby. It might be to certain language that will provide bigger benefit for the company.
Yeah, that reminds me of the biggest bit of advice that I give to people that are a senior, is that sometimes the best code that you can write is no code at all. We write code to solve problems, practical problems, and for the most part, we write code to solve business problems. But you don't always need to write lots of code. Understand how much you cost, understand how much your code is worth, and offer businesses and other people just alternatives. Yes, I could write this system for you. It'll cost $50,000, or you could just do this one thing and it'll cost you $8. And they're like, oh, cool, that's awesome. And you're like, yeah, give me $40,000 for that advice. But yeah, just know what you're worth, and yeah, that's what I was going to say.
All right, I think we've already crossed time twice. So thank you so much, panelists. A loud round of applause for them, please. Thank you so much.